first step to deviled eggs is simply to boil the eggs, okay? So I have 5 eggs. It doesn't really matter how many, as long as they kind of can be a flat layer in whatever pot you have, okay? So as long as they can, this pot might actually be a little big for these eggs, but as long as they can be a flat layer in the pot that you have, and they're not like stacked on top of each other, you should be in good shape with deviled eggs, okay? The key to boiling them is pretty straightforward. You just want to make sure they're covered with water, and then you want to bring them to a boil. And right after you have a good boil going, you want to cut the heat. So turn the eye of the stove off, turn the burner off, put the lid on, and let them sit for about 10 minutes, okay? That's what gives you those nice eggs without them getting too black or brown on the inside. If they do get black or brown or black around the outside of the yolks, that's okay. It'll still taste fine, it just doesn't look as pretty, okay? Okay, so if you don't know how to tell if eggs are bad, this is a good test right here. If the eggs float, they're bad, okay? They've got too much air in them, all right? And so looking at these, none of them are floaters. It's okay if they want to stand up a little bit like that one. We're talking about like really floating. I do have an egg that was with this group that I noticed when I pulled it out, it had a little crack on it. Right, and so that was like that in the thing. Okay, hopefully it'll float. We'll check. Yeah, so see, it's kind of up top. That would be a warning, you know. I'm not going to use it because I saw that it was visually cracked, okay, from the box. So I'm not going to use that. But if they're floating and you can't see the visual cracks, that still just means they're a little bit too old, they've got too much air in them, and have gone bad. Now, with that said, it's going to be a lot easier to peel older eggs. Okay. Okay, what that means is that if you have like really farm fresh eggs or something like that, that's great. They're going to taste wonderful, but it's going to be harder to peel the shell off of them. So the fresher your eggs are, the harder it's going to be to get the shell off when it comes time to peel them for boiling eggs. And so what I suggest is, of course, maybe this is a good use for your store-bought eggs or some of your older eggs, okay, over if you have like farm fresh eggs, it might be a big pain to peel them. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm just putting it on the burner, and I'm just going to let this go until it starts boiling. Okay, I'll film that for you so that you can see all of that. And once it starts boiling, I'm going to put the lid on it, okay, and turn the heat off and let it sit for about 10 minutes. Okay. Okay, so you can see now we've just hit that rapid boil. Okay, and so this is what I mean by a rapid boil. You can see a lot of bubbles coming up. All right, so I'm going to cut the heat off now that they're at a rapid boil. Put the lid on, and I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. Okay, and I will join y'all back in 10 minutes. While I'm waiting on this 10-minute timer, I'm just going to fix a bowl of ice, and I'm just going to scoop with a slotted spoon, just scoop the eggs into that bowl of ice. You can just cool them in the pan, but I'm gonna reuse the egg water and water my plants with that. Okay, so just a heads up, I'm gonna make a bowl of ice and have that ready here once I pull the lid off around the 10-minute mark. Okay, so the 10-minute timer just went off, right? So I have this covered. This has just been covered for 10 minutes. You can give or take a little bit. If you have a whole bunch of eggs, you might want to leave it a little bit longer, but typically 10 minutes is a good rule of thumb, okay? Like I said, you can give or take some, especially if you have, if I'm doing a bunch of eggs, I usually give it a little, maybe a little longer boil time and a little longer time under the lid, okay? But for just this few eggs, that should be plenty. And hopefully we won't have that black ring I was talking about. Like I said, if you do have some black inside on the yolk on your boiled eggs, well, you can eat it. That's not like gonna hurt you or anything, and it's not gonna affect the taste substantially, but it just might freak some people out or look a little odd, right? So I'm just moving these over into the bowl of ice that I prepared. And like I said, I could just cool it down in the pot, run some cold water over it, and throw some ice into this pot. You just want to kind of cool them down quickly is the goal, but I'm going to use this water for my plants. So I'm going to put that back here and let it cool. So that's why I'm not cooling it down in that pot. Okay, and so now I just want to make sure the ice is really surrounding them, right? And I'm gonna leave them in here for a little while, not hours, but until I'm ready to peel them and go ahead and make the stuffing, if you want to call it that, or the deviled egg component. I'm gonna leave them in there probably 15-20 minutes. You know, like I said, don't want to leave them in there in this bowl for hours, but I will let them get good and cooled down, let the ice melt some, that type of thing. I might stick a little bit more ice in there with them. Clean up. And so now they're good, covered in ice. And like I said, I'm just gonna wait until I'm ready to actually make the deviled eggs now, okay? All right, so I'm ready to peel the eggs now. All right, so I'm gonna pull them out of the ice and just crack them. I like to run them under cold water while I'm peeling them. I think it's a little easier to get them done. Okay, but let me kind of just, before I start that, so you gotta kind of tap them a little bit hard, right? Since they're boiled, since they're hard boiled eggs, okay? And you wanna get a little bit off. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can show you what you're trying to get under. Okay, this is a good thing. Okay, so you can see there's like a little skin or membrane here, and that's what you really need to kind of get a hold of to get the egg to start peeling easier. Okay, so I'm just gonna peel until I can kind of get up under that membrane, right? And again, putting it under water might help, but okay, that was a good piece right there. Okay, so I got up under that membrane with that, right? And so you can see here's the membrane right here, right? And I've got up under it, and so when I peel the rest here, it's getting a lot easier once I'm up under that membrane. Okay, and so I just want to kind of see, you can see it right here. This is what I'm talking about, that you want to get up under, okay, is this little membrane right here. Okay, and like I said, a lot of times it's easier to peel underwater, so I'm going to turn the water on and finish peeling this and the rest of the eggs, but I wanted you to be able to have that close-up look and see what you're trying to get up under. Okay, And I don't have a whole lot of eggs here, so I'm just gonna put them down the disposal because I already started putting them there. But if I have a bunch of shells, I'll probably like put them in my garden. One day I'm gonna have a compost, but I don't right now. But I'll put them in my plants and everything, or you know, put them in the trash. And I wouldn't put a bunch of eggshells down the disposal. So I might look for something to put the rest of these in. But for right now, I'm just gonna use the disposal because I don't have very many eggs, right? But again, I wouldn't put a lot of eggshells down in my disposal, and I can use them and put them around my plants and stuff like that. So I'll probably put something around here to keep at least the big pieces of shells in. Okay, actually I am going to do that. All right, so again, this water kind of helps. And see, here you can see how I'm getting up under that membrane. You can see what I'm talking about right there. Right, I got a little spot right there. Right, but yeah, like I said, if you've got real fresh eggs or the first couple times you are learning to do this, you're probably gonna have some kind of ugly peels that might peel toward the yolk and stuff like that. So just understand that, maybe make a few extra when you're first doing this to kind of count on that. And see, that's what I'm talking about. I kind of peeled off a little more than just the membrane right there. Right, you see this one's not doing as well as the others. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about an ugly one. It'll still taste okay. Not real presentable though, right? And some of the white part of the egg got caught up when I was peeling it. And that, like I said, the fresher your eggs are, the more likely that is to happen. I'm not making these for presentation, so I'm not super worried about it. But if you are making them for like a group gathering or something, then you'll definitely want to cook a few extra, because some of them are just going to be hard to peel, and you'll probably want to buy your eggs early, and so that you've got them for a little while before you try to peel them. Okay, so you'll want to buy them a little early, because again, you don't want them floating, but the fresher they are, the harder they are to peel. Here's another ugly one. All right, so the final product here, I've got two really ugly ones, one mostly decent one, a little bit ugly, and two that did pretty well. Okay, and so just like I said, these are still usable, they're just not as presentation friendly, and the fresher your eggs are, probably the more you're gonna have that look like that. Okay, first step I did here off screen is wash my hands, because I'm going to be touching a lot of things here, okay? And so what I have is, I went ahead and got out my egg serving dish. If you don't have one, I often just use a plate, even though I do have one. Okay, so I've got that out, my egg serving dish. This is where I'm gonna mix the yolk stuffing components, okay? So I'm gonna cut my eggs, put my yolks in here, put the shells here, okay? And here I just have my paper towel where they're drying, right? And I'm gonna start with the pretty one, and I'm just gonna cut it long ways. Okay, and we can see, right, what the way we cooked them did. Ideally, that's to keep you from getting that black ring. If you just boil them the whole time, you might get like a black ring around the yolk. Okay, and that's how I did it for a long time before I learned the more proper way to cook the egg. But so this is what my egg looks like, okay? All right. And again, yolks in my mixing bowl and shells just on a serving platter or a plate. And I'm just separating, taking out the yolk. Okay, this one. This one, the yolk was pretty, there's very little white, but that's okay. I will still eat it. Okay. Show you, this one is starting to get a little bit of that black tint to it that I told you about, so it might have been in there a little bit long, but it's really not that bad. But that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about that black on the yolk. Okay, and then here are the ugly ones. So I just try to do my best to cut them in a manner that minimizes the showing of the ugliness, right? These are kind of some weird eggs. Their yolks were pretty close to the whites. Let's see, that one's real pretty. Just to let you see. Okay, and y'all are gonna hate me here, but I actually don't measure anything at all as I'm making them. Okay, so the first step I do is just to get the yolks smashed reasonably well, okay? And then like everything here is just gonna be to taste, okay? So my biggest problem here, I do tend to over salt them sometimes. And so just kind of watch out for that. I'm gonna try to be a little more conservative, okay? So first thing I did was just sort of crush up my yolks, okay? And next, I'm gonna take some salt and sprinkle some salt in there. Okay, a couple shakes, right? I'm gonna sprinkle some pepper in there. Right, so that's what it looks like with the pepper in there. All right, next, I really like mustard in my eggs, okay? So I'm gonna put some ground mustard in here, okay? It really does make a little special oomph that tastes pretty good, okay? So I'm gonna put a little ground mustard. Again, it's one of those things that I can be a little heavy-handed with, and I gotta watch myself. All right, so I'm just doing a little bit of ground mustard in there, okay? And now this is more of a taste thing, but cat Minders complements eggs pretty well too. Okay, and so you can put a little in there if you like to spice things up, give a little oomph. Definitely not something, you know, salt and pepper are kind of the main things you need. And you can do cat Minders. Like I said, I really like the mustard, so I put a little bit of that in there too. I just did a little bit of cat Minders. I don't want it to overpower everything. Okay, and so going back, mixing up what I would call my dry yolk mixture because I haven't added the wet stuff yet. Okay, the wet stuff is gonna be the mayonnaise and the pickles, okay? All right, and personally, I hate mayonnaise by itself. Absolutely despise it, okay? So I actually try to use I hate it when I get too much mayonnaise in there, right? When you get too much mayonnaise in it, some people really like it, but it's gonna make it that more, less firm, much less firm. Okay, so I like to have it at a texture and use the mayonnaise. I try to get just enough for the right texture that's still fairly firm as I use the mayonnaise. So I'm gonna try to be real slow here about putting it in. And that's the main thing, is you put a little in, you mix it in, and that's also, you can taste it and see if you need to add more salt and that type of thing. Just be careful if you're tasting it. If you tend to dip your finger and lick your finger, you know, wash your hands after doing that, because we do tend to use, you do need to use your fingers a lot sometimes as we're putting the egg stuffing in the deviled eggs themselves, okay? But I'm gonna start here with, I'm gonna get this to put my utensils on. Okay. I'm gonna start here with a little bit of mayonnaise. Okay. And I'm gonna mix that in. And again, this is just about getting it to the texture and consistency you like. If you're one of those people that loves mayonnaise, you'll probably want to use a little more, right? But you can see it's kind of starting to stick together, right? And so it needs a little bit more there. And again, I'm being pretty conservative because I don't like mayonnaise. I like the way it makes textures of things, but I don't like the taste of mayonnaise. So I try to use it just the bare minimum needed for the right texture. Okay, and this is getting pretty close to the right texture. Most people would probably say a little more mayonnaise. Me, I'm not so sure that I want much more mayonnaise. I might get a tiny bit more, but this is about the right texture for me, especially since it's gonna get a little more watered down when I add in the pickles, okay? But just for good measure, I'll add just a tiny bit more, because like I said, most people like their eggs less stiff than I do, okay? So that's a good consistency right here. I'm gonna leave it at this, okay? And so I'm gonna bring this up and let you see that consistency, okay? Okay, so that's what I want mine to look like before I add the pickles in, okay? And so now the next thing for the pickles, okay, traditionally Southern style deviled eggs are gonna use sweet pickles, okay? Once again, another thing that I'm not really a big fan of. I will eat them. I'm happy to eat all deviled eggs, whether they're a little over mayonnaise or whether they have sweet pickles or dill pickles. But personally, I'm much more of a dill pickle fan, so I use dill pickle in my deviled eggs. Like I said, but the traditional thing is to use sweet pickles. Okay, so if you really want to go with that traditional flavor, you'll want sweet pickles instead of dill. This is just dill relish. No idea what happened to the tag around it, but this is relish. You can, if you have a lot of patience, you can have regular pickles and just dice them yourself or put them in a food processor and do it that way. I usually just buy the relish so that it's already chopped up nice for me, and if it has a little extra something in it, I don't typically care, okay? So again, just start with a little bit and mix it and kind of see what texture that makes it. And I think that's probably gonna be about the right amount of pickles. And I told you it would get a little bit moister and a little bit less stiff as we added that pickle in there, as it did. And again, all of these things are kind of to taste. So if you really like pickle and pickle juice, or if you want this to be a little less stiff, you know, just add some more. And before I put it in, before I start to pack my eggs, okay, so before I start stuffing the eggs, it's a good idea, take a baby spoon here, to just get a little bit and taste it and see if you need to add more salt, pepper, mustard, you know, etc. Okay. And so I almost stumped my toe with the salt on that. I kind of did, but fortunately, I like salt. That's probably a little bit much salt. But overall, I really like that flavor. Okay, and so I'm pretty happy with it. I'm not gonna do it anymore with it. If you're like me, you maybe used a little too much salt. One thing you can do, can add a little mayonnaise. I always forget the pickles add salt too, so you might can add a little bit more mayonnaise if you don't mind that and gave yourself that that much. And again, the egg white is going to temper that some too. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about it. But yeah, these are definitely salty, so you probably want to use a little fewer shakes than I did. I'm used to making a whole lot more than 5 or 6 eggs, and so I tend to get a little more heavy-handed. Okay, so now all that's left to do is to take the stuffing and put it in the eggs, and then I think traditionally paprika is what people use to kind of sprinkle over and make that little red powder on top of it. I'm going to use cayenne because I'm just about out of paprika, and I like cayenne pepper just fine too, so I'm going to use some cayenne pepper instead. But let's go ahead and get to stuffing. Okay. And again, this is where if you've licked your hands at all or anything like that, you definitely want to make sure you wash them before this part, because you are handling all of this with your hands, and a lot of times we have to scoop stuff off the spoon with our hands, kind of help it along, right? And so here we go. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing over here. Maybe you need to do it down kind of low. So I'm just scooping it in like that, right? And typically you should have enough stuffing for all of your eggs, because, you know, mass in equals mass out and that type of stuff. But sometimes if you overstuff some of them, you might be kind of scraping it. Or if you eat a lot of your egg stuffing while you're making them, then obviously you might be having a hard time getting to the end. So, you know, good to maybe conservatively kind of put them in flat. Or you could throw away some of your whites or eat some of your whites. If you made enough to do that, you could throw away your ugly whites but still use the eggs from them, right? So keep that in mind as something you can do to make sure you have plenty to kind of overstuff the eggs. That's one thing. If you have like the ugly whites like I did, you can use the yolk from them, and see, like this one, there's not really much point in keeping that one, other than it will be one that I will eat. But all right, so I'll just put it over here to the side. All right, and then let me get all the rest of this out. And again, you can see why it's very important to make sure you've got clean hands as you're doing this, especially as you're cooking for more than just your family, right? Okay, so there are my eggs. And like I said, the last step would be to sprinkle with paprika, or in my case, I'm just gonna use some cayenne pepper once I find it. I'm probably gonna rearrange these eggs too. Okay, so I just rearranged the eggs a little bit so that they're all close together as I sprinkle. Again, paprika is traditional, but I'm just gonna do cayenne. It's a little bit spicier, a little bit hotter than paprika, but still that pretty look. And once again, I'm always pretty heavy-handed here, trying not to be, but you know, that's just to give it that little extra. And then you can always top it with other stuff too. You know, there's a lot of flexibility with deviled eggs. Some people, if you want to make them real pretty, you could get a piping bag, and instead of just spooning in the stuffing like I did, you can pipe it in with a piping bag, and that can, somebody who really likes spice will get that one. And so that's one of the things that you can do as well, is just pipe it in with a piping bag. I never do that. I just use a spoon. I'm too lazy for that. But that is a way to make them a lot more presentable, you know, is to use a piping bag. In that case, usually the ones that I see piped are a lot less stiff than what I used, and so you probably want to use a little bit more mayonnaise. If you're a mayonnaise person, that's a good thing for using a little bit more mayonnaise. If and once again, you know, if you want to kind of overstuff them, you're probably going to have to discard some of the whites to be able to really overstuff them, but you still use the yolks of the whites that you discard. Okay, all right, so because some of these are going to be kind of flat because I used exactly the same amount, except that one that I discarded, but I still stuffed it a little bit and I ate it already, and it was good. So I'm pretty happy with this. Okay.